I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the impeachment trial in the United States. Specifically, let's focus in on the latest leak via the New York Times, and it has to do with John Bolton. And let me take you to Breitbart, since they're the ones that broke this news. And first, we'll start from the Bolton side, and this is from Breitbart. The New York Times reported Sunday evening that Bolton's draft book manuscript, which has been submitted to the NSC for pre-publication review on December 30th, alleged that President Trump told Bolton in August 2019 that he wanted to withhold security assistance to Ukraine until it agreed to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden, among others. So that's what's prompting all this news about Bolton and Trump and Ukraine. This new leak via the New York Times that said Bolton was told that he wants all this aid withheld until Joe Biden's investigated. That came out of the New York Times. The title of this Breitbart article, though, Alexander, is what's really interesting. The title reads, Source, Alexander Vindman's brother, Yevgeny, clears publication by NSC officials. And so the person that was in charge for looking at all publications, books, manuscripts, whatever is written at the NSC to clear them is Vindman's twin brother. People, I'm sure, will remember Vindman as he was the person that most likely leaked the telephone call to the whistleblower whose name we're not allowed to say, which then started this whole charade and this whole hoax. And Alexander, I will read you 3 tweets now, because this leak via the New York Times has prompted Susan Collins and Mitt Romney, who we have always been suspicious of, in the sense that they would be the senators, the Republican senators, that might cause some trouble for the Republicans and for Trump during these impeachment hearings. It's prompted them to start to examine the possibility of having Bolton testify. So this is from Susan Collins via ABC News. Just in, GOP Senator Susan Collins, quote, the reports about John Bolton's book strengthen the case for witnesses and have prompted a number of conversations among my colleagues. Via Meet the Press, a tweet, Alexander, watch, GOP Senator Mitt Romney says, quote, it is increasingly apparent that it would be important to hear from John Bolton, end quote, adding it is increasingly likely other GOP senators would join in too. And of course, closing it out and getting to your comments and analysis, Alexander, is a tweet, 2 tweets, back to back from President Trump. I never told John Bolton that the aid to Ukraine was tied to investigations into Democrats, including the Bidens. In fact, he never complained about this at the time of his very public termination. If John Bolton said this, it was only to sell a book. With that being said, the transcripts of my calls with President Zelensky are all the proof that is needed. In addition to the fact that President Zelensky and the foreign minister of Ukraine said there was no pressure and no problems. Additionally, I met with President Zelensky at the United Nations. All right, Alexander, I won't get into the follow-up tweets on Trump. I think that's all the context that we need in order for you to get into your analysis.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things to say. First of all, I don't think anybody is surprised that this inverted commas bombshell has appeared just now at the start of the Senate trial. I mean, clearly this has been cooking for a while. I mean, that Bolton has been on a mission to cause Donald Trump as much damage as possible. Well, we've all known it. And that he's writing a book, we didn't know. But I mean, he's pinged his book to his friends, the Vindman brothers in the National Security Council. And of course, unsurprising perhaps, that a book which is being reviewed by Yevgeny Vindman, brother of Alexander Vindman, who is, of course, the person who was, in my opinion, almost certainly the originator of this whole saga. Yevgeny Vindman, a book being reviewed by him. Suddenly we're learning all these things about that book appearing in the New York Times, which is most unsurprising to me. Now, I would point out a couple of things about that New York Times article. Firstly, it doesn't actually quote the book. So this is all about what someone, possibly Yevgeny Vindman, says they've read in the book. It's not actually a direct quote from the book. And I think that might be important, because if you drill down into that article carefully, it's actually not very coherent. What it suggests is that Donald Trump and Bolton had a sort of discussion back in August. Trump was in an angry mood. He talked about, the need for the Ukrainians to sort out corruption in their country. He's talked about the need for the Ukrainians to help with the Russiagate investigation, but the Duran counter Russiagate investigation, which is, as we know, a true and correct investigation. And at some point in this discussion, the Bidens came up. But it's not clear that he did actually talk about a quid pro quo necessarily. I mean, he was talking about holding up May aid until the Ukrainians made some commitments on, cleaning up corruption. That's never been disputed. But exactly what Trump is alleged to have said is not clear from this. But taking it a big step further, other people who, according to this book, are supposed to have been witnesses of these discussions, namely Barr and Mulvaney, are contradicting the account that this leaker from the National Security Council, who may be Yevgeny Vindman, is saying in the book. I mean, Mulvaney says that he never heard Donald Trump at any point in time say that he was linking a stop of aid to Ukraine to investigations of Democrats. He's actually issued a statement today saying exactly that. And of course, Barr is saying that he doesn't know what Bolton, if it is Bolton, is talking about. Now, we've talked about John Bolton many times. John Bolton is a rattlesnake. He is not somebody that you rely upon in a I said, he said type of situation. He's also a man with a massive grudge because Trump sacked him from the National Security Council. He's no longer Trump's national security advisor. He's also writing a book which shows that he's intending to make money. And importantly and interestingly, he didn't come forward with any of this before. He's now apparently held it all back for his book. So I don't really see either that this takes us very far forward, because even what the New York Times is telling us at second or third hand is in this book doesn't seem to be that damning or that far in conflict, actually, with the transcript, the report of the conversation between Trump and Zelensky, in which Trump again talked about corruption in Ukraine, talks about the role Ukraine played in Russiagate, and mentions the Bidens, but doesn't actually talk about investigating the Bidens. Doesn't actually seem to be directly in conflict with that, but to the extent that it is, the other key witnesses are disputing it. So I don't see where this takes us forward, actually. It seems to me that this is really yet another one of these endless attempts that we've seen throughout the Donald Trump presidency to make out that some great bombshell has exploded. And then you go and you look through the pieces, you pick your way through the rubble, and you find that it's not actually a bombshell. It's an empty dud. It doesn't actually advance things anyway at all. Now, I'm saying all of that to analyze what we've been told about the evidence. Now, there are massive issues about calling John Bolton as a witness, which I've touched on in previous programs about the fact that, if that happens, if he's called as a witness, without the question of executive privilege, the president's executive privilege, to keep his discussions with his chief advisor on foreign policy confidential. I mean, that could have been tested in the court. It wasn't tested in the court. Donald Trump has said, if my national security advisor comes along and gives evidence in Congress about the things I said to him in private, how can any world leader assume that I'm able to keep my secrets on foreign policy? And that is a serious issue. It's a serious concern. American courts, US courts have taken it extremely seriously. Given that this is so, this is, of course, an attempt by the Democrats to bring it to the Senate to try to circumvent the question of executive privilege. But putting all that to one side, even if you disregard that, even if you say, well, the Vindmans, and we know how reliable and impartial they are saying, it's fine for John Bolton to say these things. Even if that is true, on the strength of what I'm hearing, I don't see this is really very interesting evidence, actually.
Yeah, I mean, Alexander, they've already destroyed the president's ability to speak with world leaders by leaking this, by having Trump submit this phone conversation, essentially, this transcript between him and Zelensky. And we've commented on this many times. What world leaders now trust that their phone conversations with the U.S. president won't go down the same path that this Zelensky phone call went down? And it was highly embarrassing for Zelensky, to be honest, to have all of this stuff leaked. So, I mean, world leaders are...
It's a disaster for him, and he's paying a heavy price in Ukraine. There's a major, we haven't talked about this, but there's been a governmental crisis in Ukraine. The prime minister has been caught on tape criticizing Zelensky's ability to conduct economic policy. And so the very last thing that Zelensky needs is having his ability to conduct foreign policy called into question also. It has been a disaster for him.
Yeah, so why would any world leader want to get on a phone call with the U.S. president? You start from there. If they call Bolton to testify, why even have the NSC? Why even have that department? They need to do away with it then. Because, once again, what world leader would want to engage in any type of foreign policy with the U.S. president, knowing that he's going to consult his advisors, and those advisors 2, 3, 4 years down the line are going to write a tell-all book, and they're going to just, spill the beans, gossip, say whatever they want about what went on in the White House with regards to world leaders, whether it's the world leader of China, Russia, Ukraine, Canada, Australia, it doesn't matter. Why have these people around you when you're going to run the risk of having all this stuff leaked out? So right then and there, you're completely demolishing and weakening and destroying the office of the president, the executive branch.
Indeed. I mean, can I just talk about this book? I mean, obviously, there's what the lawyers, in other words, Yevgeny Vindman on the National Security Council decide about the book. But, I mean, over and above and beyond that, if the president feels before a book is published that it breaches his privileges, he's in a position to apply as president of the United States to the court for an injunction to prevent it being published, even if it's been cleared by the National Security Council. If White House counsel advises him that that's proper and appropriate, he is not bound by the decisions of someone, a lawyer working in the National Security Council. He has a right to privilege, to confidentiality of his private discussions on policy with his senior advisors. I am, very skeptical about the extent to which this book even exists. But I suspect if it does, and I think, presumably there's a manuscript of some kind floating around somewhere. I mean, there seems to be various agendas at play. I mean, once again, one has to think of the financial agenda. It does look as if one of the reasons why Bolton wants to come forward and testify in the Senate is because if he's able to do that, then he can publish his book without interference by the president, because effectively the Senate has overridden the president's entitlement to confidentiality. So, he's got a financial interest, in other words, in coming to the Senate and giving evidence in this way. So, lots of problems here, and the legal issues are very complicated and very serious. And they do go to the root of the president's ability to conduct the government of the United States. A fact, of course, which the Democrats aren't interested in or concerned about in the slightest. But as I said, going back to the impeachment itself, firstly, I don't know whether he will be called to testify. I mean, it's only Romney and Collins who are the two people we've always been skeptical about up to now. But even if he does, I'm not convinced, based on that article which I read in the New York Times, that it amounts to as much as people say. It reminds me very much of what people were saying about Sondland. Do you remember about Sondland? That was the bombshell, and except it wasn't a bombshell because it was a guess. And in Bolton's case, he's giving, it seems, a rather incoherent account of this discussion, and one which Mulvaney and Barr, two arguably more trustworthy sources, are contradicting.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole point of this. The whole point is for this leak is to get people like Romney, Collins, and like we've said in many, many videos, and once again, it goes to show that our analysis is 100% right. The whole point of this is not to win.
No.
For the Democrats, is not to win this impeachment trial in the Senate. It's to get 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 Republican senators to vote with the Democrats. They're working on Romney. They're working on Collins. They're hoping maybe they can get another 2 or 3 more, or even 1, so that they can go on the campaign and say, you know what, these Republicans also don't trust President Trump, or also think he should have been impeached. That's been the whole purpose of this. Not to get 16 that they need, 15, 16, is to get 3 or 4. And they always knew they had Romney and Collins.
Yes.
They always knew they had Mitt. That's for damn sure. And a couple more points, Alexander. We've seen this before. The most recent case that we've seen was not Sondland, even though that was one case. Remember Holmes with the superhuman hearing that heard the phone conversation?
Yeah.
And he came in last minute and said, you know what, I heard it with my superhuman hearing. When Sondland was speaking on the phone, I actually heard it in a busy restaurant. So, I mean, that was the most recent case of the most ridiculous bombshell that the Democrats rolled out. And my final question to you is, why the hell do you have national security advisors and these intelligence chiefs that the United States president, the most powerful country in the world, the president is discussing very sensitive foreign policy issues? Why do you even give them the opportunity or the leeway to write books? Is it so much to ask to tell these guys who have the privilege to work in the White House and to advise the president, a dream job, an important job, that, you know what, guys, if you take this job, there's no tell-all books. There's no, making money off of these publications on the back end. That's your duty. You're serving the American people. You're serving the president. Is it so much? Does this go on in any other country?
Well, I'm sure
I can't think of any other country where people serve, a 1, 2, 3-year tenure with the president or the prime minister, and then sit there a year later and write a tell-all book.
Well,
it's beyond stupid, this thing.
In Bolton's case, it's not a year later. It's a few months later. I mean, he was sacked. Just a few months ago. Let's not forget this. But I mean, the answer is it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen in business and commerce, as we very well know.
They should just bar this practice.
Well, you
want the job? There are no books.
Well, you
at
have
least for 20 years. No books.
You have privacy.
No movies. No songs. Nothing.
You privacy clauses in employment contracts. They're extremely common. I mean, there's nothing unusual in that, and perhaps that should be enforced and imposed. I'm not in any way disputing this. All I'm
Am I
simply
crazy to
saying,
say that?
no, you're
It's so
not crazy to
simple.
say that. I mean, it's entirely, and of course, in Britain we have very strong rules about this. There's all kinds of secrecy laws that also exist, and in fact, it's very difficult for ex-officials to simply come along and write memoirs in this way. Prime ministers tend to, but they're about the only people that do. And there are very, very strong rules about classification, and it's certainly true in other countries also. But in this particular case, we must remember that this book, as I said, Trump would probably be in a position legally to prevent it being published anyway. He could probably prevent it being published. What is preventing him doing this is the impeachment. If the Senate calls Bolton as a witness, then Bolton, when he publishes his book, has a very strong defense against any injunction that Donald Trump applies for to prevent him publishing it, by saying, well, this is already public record because it's already been published in the Senate during the impeachment trial. That is what would give Bolton the option, the opportunity to get his book published, irrespective of whether there are privacy clauses or confidentiality clauses or what the law says. And that gives him, given that he's written this book, a massively strong motive to get the Senate to call him as a witness, because it enables him to publish a book which arguably he should not be able to.
The same Bolton that lied the United States into a war with Iraq over fake WMDs. And we're going to sit here and take this guy's word.
Well, we shouldn't. I mean, that's exactly the point. I mean, we shouldn't be taking his word. I mean, he is an individual with a very, very bad record of twisting and bureaucratic infighting and deception, and of putting pressure on people and strong-arming foreign governments and strong-arming foreign international entities like the OPCW and the International Atomic Energy Authority. I mean, I've been told quite straightforwardly, for example, that he came along to the head of the OPCW in the run-up to the Iraq War, and a Brazilian diplomat, and told him, unless you leave this building, we in Washington will arrange for you to be sacked, and we're going to make it absolutely possible. We're going to make sure afterwards that you are going to suffer. You're going to suffer personally. And he was absolutely that direct and that obvious. Now, do you really trust the account of a person like that? I mean, he is a thoroughly dangerous man. It was a huge mistake for Donald Trump to bring him onto the National Security Council.
Completely agree.
I mean, it was entirely.
Why did he do it? Completely agree.
It was like taking a viper to your bosom. It was inevitable that something like this was going to happen, given John Bolton's record. So, extraordinarily dangerous man, who is of course going to, breach your confidences if he can, and who is undoubtedly also going to find all kinds of devices, like an impeachment, like he's going to use an impeachment to get his own book published. And, for all I know, I don't know this, but, this is Bolton's record. He's played a big role behind the scenes in getting the impeachment going in the first place. I mean, he's presumably continues to have access to people like the two Vindman brothers, for example. It's not surely a coincidence that his book has gone to them. Who knows what other people he's been speaking to? I mean, he presumably knows the whistleblower, for example. So, he was a very, very dangerous man to bring in, and a very foolish of Donald Trump to make him national security advisor. But putting all that aside, he's not a credible witness, and he shouldn't be treated as one. And if we can come back to Romney and Collins for a moment, Romney and Collins may vote to call Bolton as a witness. I'm not sure whether they will. I mean, they're sort of talking as if they might. It's not clear that any other Republican senators will. Collins and Romney are not enough by themselves to do that. The line may still hold. But even if Bolton is called, given what a very unreliable witness he is, given how very shaky his evidence is, given that that evidence is already being contradicted by Mulvaney and Barr, who are, as I said, far more reliable people than Bolton is, given Bolton's financial interest in getting the Senate to call him as a witness and to get him to testify so that he can get his book published, I'm not convinced that even then Romney and Collins are going to risk the wrath of the Republican base by necessarily voting for impeachment on such flimsy grounds, even if that is what they want to do. I mean, bear in mind, with the Kavanaugh case, they ultimately voted with a Republican majority. So, we mustn't assume anything at the moment. You're absolutely right that is what the Democrats are trying to do. They're trying to discover divisions and weaknesses within the Republican majority. But it's not clear that Romney and Collins have enough Republicans to support them. And I'm going to say something. If it's only those two, if it's only Romney and it's only Collins, if there aren't 3 or 4 others to join them, then even if they vote to call Bolton, I think personally that they're unlikely to vote for an impeachment, because that would still leave a majority in the Senate voting against the impeachment, and it would leave them very exposed politically. That's my analysis.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bolton lie under oath, much the same way that Clapper or Brennan lie under oath. I mean, that wouldn't shock me whatsoever.
Well, of course not. I mean, John Bolton is John Bolton. We're not talking about some Abraham Lincoln coming to the Senate and giving evidence there. I mean, we're talking about somebody who is about as far from a reliable witness as it's possible to get. As I said, he's got a financial interest in this. He's got a massive grudge against the man who sacked him, and of course, he's got his own intrigues. He's burning his bridges with the Republicans. So he wants to please the Democrats, because, to be straightforward about this, I mean, Bolton remains an insanely ambitious and extremely dangerous man. So, he's got all those things in play. But of course, I mean, already, let's remember, Mulvaney and Barr are saying that they just don't recognize the account that appears to be in Bolton's book as in any way true. So, you bring along to the Senate a person who is a completely unreliable witness. I don't see how that assists you. I'd have thought it weakens your case rather than strengthens it.
Yeah, the whole thing stinks. Vindman brothers, Bolton, last minute leak by the New York Times, over and over, same story, over and over and over again.
Well, if I may say, actually, Bolton is Bolton, and I find this completely understandable. I mean, the Vindman brothers have an obsession with Ukraine, which I don't understand.
Yeah, but they're still working. They're still working at the White House.
That's still,
there you go.
And in fact, I think it was Tucker Carlson was brought up, did a whole program about this, about all these people who are still there and they haven't been sacked. And this is quite amazing and extraordinary. You say these appalling things about your own boss and you keep your job. And again, I mean, what is O'Brien, who is supposed to be the national security advisor, the new one, what is he doing? How is he allowing all these people to
he's a Bolton protege.
Well, he is a Bolton protege.
So once again, Trump has a massive HR hiring problem. He really does. It's perhaps Trump's greatest weakness are the people he places around him.
Yes, I know. I agree. I entirely agree. But as I said, the people, the entity, which for me always plays the most malignant role in these matters, is not Bolton, and it's not the Vindman brothers, it's not O'Brien, because these are a known quantity. It's the New York Times, which continuously lends itself to these intrigues against the President of the United States. Let's be absolutely clear about this. It is not reporting news, and it is not providing opinion pieces. It is assisting various entities, various people, to pursue their campaign to unseat the President of the United States. Is that something a national newspaper ought to be doing?
Well, they've been doing it before
indeed.
Trump even became president. They were after him. So
I agree, but I think that if you want me to tell you where the root of the cancer is, it's there. Because if we had a functioning media in the United States, none of this would be possible. None of this would be happening. They would be saying to people like the Vindman brothers, if it was them who were leaking the story, and they would be saying to people like Bolton, I'm very sorry, we are not touching this story. This goes to the issue of the impeachment, which is now before the Senate, and it's not our business. We are a newspaper. We are not a newsmaker.
We have a functioning media, Alexander. We're a functioning media, but we're constantly demonetized and we're constantly suppressed on YouTube. We have Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and he's rotting in prison. So, I mean, the functioning parts of the media are being shut out while the New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, and mark my words, Bolton will be a contributor on CNN or MSNBC soon. You'll be seeing him there as a contributor as well.
Well, along with Brennan,
they're the ones
and all the others, absolutely, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, we could go on forever. The whole thing stinks.
I entirely agree with that. But precisely because we are in the media and we are under these sort of pressures, when I see a newspaper, a national newspaper with the kind of reputation and history that the New York Times has, behave in this fashion, I mean, it does upset me and it makes me cross, angry. I mean, you're very angry. There we are.
It's not what it used to be.
Yes. Well, I know. I mean, can I just say, the point I'm trying to make is bureaucratic intrigues go on all the time in Washington. I mean, in any organization, big organization, particularly public organizations, you will find people like Vindman and you'll find people like Bolton. There are always people like that around. If you have a healthy media, that keeps them under control. If you don't, then these people acquire a dangerous degree of power. And that is what we're seeing as a result of this New York Times story.
My final statement on this, listening to your last comment, Alexander, the root of this whole problem, in my opinion, is that Trump never got a proper chief of staff in place.
Oh, absolutely true. I mean,
the chief of staff would have dealt with the Vindmans, would have advised him on the Boltons, a good person as chief of staff, someone that he can trust, someone that knows Trump and that knows Washington. He never, ever, ever could find that person. And that's been the root of all his problems, because he has a tremendous, a terrible HR problem. Terrible.
I entirely agree with that. In fact, dare I say it, I wrote about this. I remember writing about this way back in 2017, that he needed a James Baker type figure, somebody who had that kind of skill and understanding and knowledge of the Washington system, and who was there at the same time to protect him and to cover his back. I knew who could be trusted and who couldn't. And he's never found a person like that, and he's paying a terrible price for it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You hit it right there perfectly. A James Baker type that wants to protect the president, the office of the president, but understands Washington.
Yes. Because Trump himself doesn't. I mean, He's a lot better. He understands it a lot better than he did when he first became president, but he still doesn't understand it fully. And he doesn't understand his own government. He doesn't understand how the White House and the National Security Council work. And he doesn't understand the people who serve on these bodies. I mean, this has been, the tragedy of this presidency, if you wish, that he's never really run his own ship. I mean, he's got a crew that is constantly in mutiny against him.
No, the chief of staff should run the ship.
And the chief of staff should run the ship, exactly.
At least the operations side. The chief of staff to me is like an excellent chief of operations, an excellent COO.
Absolutely.
You don't have a good COO. The CEO is sunk.
Absolutely. Completely true. Completely true. But then, we both worked in organizations. We both understand this. It's strange that Trump has never understood.
He never could find that guy, and that's been his biggest headache.
No,
and he's paying a price for it over and over and over again. And Tucker Carlson, you're right. Tucker Carlson had a show on this. Maybe like a week ago or 10 days ago, and he laid out the warning. Why is Vindman there? And there you go.
Exactly. Why all these extraordinary people who have, acted against the president, who have betrayed the president and been so incredibly disloyal to him. Why are they still working for him when they're trying to engineer his removal? It is quite remarkable, actually. It is extremely bizarre.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We can go on for a while, but we'll leave it there. All right, Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on that subscribe button, click that notifications bell, and smash that like button. Also donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. Your donation really helps out this channel a lot. And look for us on BitChute as well. We post all our videos on BitChute, so check us out there. And go to the Duran shop. Pick up some magic mugs. Pick up some t-shirts and some V-necks when you purchase something from the Duran shop. You really help us out a lot. Because at the Duran Alexander, we don't have any COO or chief of staff problems. Everything runs nice and smooth, especially at the Duran shop.
Absolutely. We are a smooth running Swiss watch of precision and efficiency, except in fact, we're even better than that because, the best Swiss watches, well, they have their occasional snarled ups, as I've discovered in my time, but we never do. We have the most amazing magic mugs. This is my oldest, and in some ways, the one I always return to, because as you can see there, I think you can see there, it's got the Duran double-headed eagle. This is our very own double-headed eagle, different from the Russian or the Byzantine or any of the others. It's the double-headed eagle that looks over the entire world, both the east and the west. That's why it's pointing in both directions, and it keeps an eye and track on everything, which is what we try to do at the Duran. That's what we're all about. And you can also find that double-headed eagle there on our Duran shirts. Alex has got it. You can see it on his shirt also. But if I may say, we have all these wonderful things. I mean, these magic mugs, as I said, my oldest perhaps, these are such wonderful mugs. They're the best mugs I've ever had. And I say that without any hesitation, and with complete knowledge of mugs, because I've run through scores of them. I'm always drinking tea or coffee, and I'm breaking them, and I'm chipping them, and I'm dropping them. And you can see that this mug, which I've had, for about a year now, it's in perfect condition because it's so strong, it's so light, it balances so well, it doesn't slip out of your hand, you don't get burnt because the sort of tea spills out all over your hands. It keeps your tea hot, or your coffee hot, if that's what you prefer. It keeps your beer cold, if that's what you prefer. It is a wonderful magic mug, and you'll find a whole range of them on our shop, and you'll find a whole range of our amazing Duran shirts on our shop, like the polo shirt, the really stylish, elegant, comfortable, remarkable 100% cotton polo shirt I'm wearing now. But you will also find long sleeve t-shirts and short sleeve t-shirts and v-neck shirts. You'll find hoodies and hats and stickers, all of excellent, amazing quality. The feedback we get from our viewers who buy these items of merchandise from our shop is phenomenal. People are thrilled with them. So you can help the Duran by coming to our shop, buying these things. You can help yourself by owning these things. So don't hold back. Come to our shop, buy from our shop, support the Duran, be the proud owner. Alex will tell you how.
Just go to theduranshop.com. You'll find links in the description box down below. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.